U.S. President Donald Trump fires National Security Advisor John Bolton. Union workers walk off the job in Argentina to protest against a spiraling economy. And the Israeli Prime Minister has said he will annex large parts of the West Bank if re-elected next week. From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South. I'm Doris Polu. U.S. President Donald Trump has sacked his national security advisor John Bolton. This is the third security advisor Trump has fired. The president announced the decision on Twitter, saying he disagreed strongly with many of Bolton's decisions. John Bolton has been one of the most aggressive members of the Trump administration, pushing for more sanctions and even military action against Venezuela and Iran. Trump says he will announce his fourth advisor next week. Our correspondent in Washington, D.C., Jorge Gestoso, brings us more.
Thank you. The third national security advisor so far in the presidency of Donald Trump, John Bolton, has left the White House with conflicting reports if he has resigned or if he was fired. President Trump said in Twitter, "I asked John for his resignation, which he has given to me this morning. I thank John very much for his service, and I will be naming a new national security advisor next week." But John Bolton in Twitter has said, "I offered to resign last night, and President Trump said, let's talk about it tomorrow." Supposedly it was a very strong discussion last night among the two of them regarding Afghanistan and the Taliban peace talks. John Bolton has a reputation of being a hawk, also very much against Venezuela. He was proposing a military intervention in Venezuela to oust the government of President Maduro, and he was supporting Juan Guaidó. He was against North Korea and Iran, in favor of Brazil's Jair Bolsonaro and Israel, and supposedly is going to be naming a new Secretary of Security Advisor, meaning the National Security Advisor, in the coming 2 weeks. So far, we don't know yet who could be the replacement. We'll get back to you now.
Jorge Gestoso, our correspondent, with that report. The Venezuelan armed forces have started military exercises on the border with Colombia. On Monday night, President Nicolas Maduro met with the National Defense Council to agree on the lines of action to protect national sovereignty and the security of Venezuela. He said this follows numerous attempts coming from Colombia to fabricate incidents on the border as a pretext for military action. These include 42 actions recorded within the last 3 months with a collaboration of civilian and military traitors.
I want our people to be well informed. We are taking all necessary decisions and denouncing these attacks to all levels. We have the evidence that proves that there is a conspiracy in Colombia in order to attack the public sectors in Venezuela. We have the evidence that shows how in the last 3 months, Colombia's intelligence services has tried to recruit Venezuelan officials in order to attack our radar system, air defense system, and the Venezuelan missile system for these days.
Our correspondent in Caracas, Leonel Retamal, has more.
President Nicolas Maduro spoke in a national television broadcast on Monday night, accompanied by his ministers and the entire military high command. It was a meeting of the National Security Council, which you remember was activated in July in the face of another real military threat along the border. And President Maduro referred to a similar situation last night with a real threat of military action from Colombia. For a couple of weeks now, President Maduro has been talking about the danger of a false flag operation on the border. That is, a fabricated incident used to justify military action by Colombia. And this comes shortly before the General Assembly of the United Nations opens in New York. That is why, last week, President Maduro declared an orange alert along the whole border with Colombia and called for these military exercises that are starting today. Venezuela and Colombia share a border that extends for 2,200 kilometers. All the components that the Bolivarian armed forces, including the militia and with support from social movements, will be taking part in these drills, which will continue until the 28th of September. The president also said he was alerting the international community to this danger of conflict on the border, insisting that Venezuela is committed to peace but will not allow violence to develop along its borders.
At the United Nations in Geneva, the Cuban and Venezuelan governments have responded to the latest version of the UN's Human Rights Report on Venezuela. The Cuban representative expressed solidarity on behalf of the ALBA Alliance.
In the name of the Bolivarian Alliance for the Peoples of Our America, ALBA, we once again condemn the unprecedented campaign of aggression against Venezuela, which seeks to overthrow the Bolivarian government and dismantle the social and political gains of Hugo Chavez, which have been maintained by the government of President Nicolás Maduro. This campaign not only denies the obvious achievements of the Bolivarian Revolution, it also seeks to demonize any independent political alternative in Latin America and the Caribbean. The authors of this campaign are politically motivated and use this issue of human rights in a hypocritical way to undermine genuine democracy in Venezuela and justify a military intervention.
Meanwhile, the Venezuelan ambassador to the UN in Geneva spoke for the non-aligned movement.
In the name of the movement of non-aligned countries, we welcome the decision of the High Commissioner for Human Rights to strengthen even further the constructive commitment with member states in bilateral and multilateral human rights. We also agree with the need to defend the universal application of human rights in an impartial way, without distinction, and with the constant revision of the achievements and weakness in human rights of all the member states.
In Honduras, protesters have clashed with police in the capital Tegucigalpa over the construction of a luxury housing complex. Residents say it would endanger one of the main water sources of the city. Thousands of protesters blocked the road near the construction site in La Tigra National Park, demanding authorities to withdraw the project. The park is one of the capital's most biodiverse areas. According to environmental organizations, the project would see 1,800 housing units and about 30 commercial centers put up inside the park. Protesters took to the streets of Buenos Aires, Argentina, as part of a union strike and asking for relief from the spiraling economy. Members of the country's largest trade unions walked off their jobs as part of the strike. For the past year, the country's economy has been reeling from recession and fears grow of a debt default. Protesters carried banners slamming President Mauricio Macri's economic austerity policies, rising poverty, mass layoffs, and a $57 billion deal with the IMF they say has only aggravated these issues.
The government can end hunger in homes today simply by doubling the universal allowance for a child from 2,500 to 5,600 pesos. But they don't do this. And why? Because hunger and poverty are a mechanism to keep people fighting for their survival and limit their ability to think of the future. As workers, we want a society that doesn't exclude, that is inclusive and just. That is why we are fighting.
Fires have swept across the Andean foothills of northern Peru. Some 150 hectares brush and pine forests have been burned in the hillside outside Cajamarca. According to the National Forest and Wildlife Service, firefighters are clearing gaps through the hillside vegetation, hoping to stop the fire spread.
As you can see, this part here burned yesterday, and now the fire has come to life again. That area over there is Granja Porcón, a ranch and tourist attraction. We're close to the highway with the rescue police and firefighters that have come to help, and what they're doing right now is creating a gap so the fire doesn't advance.
Now, a number of wildfires have restarted in Bolivia, going from under 500 to almost 2,000 meters despite the ongoing efforts by the government to protect the region. This was reported on the same day that a firefighting plane sent by the Russian government arrived in Bolivia. We have more in this report.
This is the Russian Ilyushin Il-76, the second largest airplane in the world. It was sent by the Russian government to help extinguish fires in Chiquitania, in the department of Santa Cruz.
These pilots have a lot of experience. Mr. President, people of Bolivia, I can guarantee that the fire will be extinguished.
President Evo Morales said that the main difference between the Ilyushin as opposed to other planes currently being used by the government to put out the wildfires, like the 747 supertanker and a Chinook, is that the former are rented, while the Ilyushin was sent as a sign of goodwill from Russia.
We are only paying operating expenses for this plane. I salute President Vladimir Putin and the people of Russia for this great sign of friendship.
President Evo Morales also confirmed various reports of increasing fires in the forest of Chiquitania, where more than 1 million hectares have already been affected.
I have bad news. More fires have been confirmed in the municipalities of Concepción, San Ignacio de Velasco, and San Matias, where we had them almost under control. We have extinguished fires in Charagua twice now. We are being told there may be thousands of new hotspots.
He announced he will continue to work on plans to restore what has been destroyed by the fire.
I want to call on the leaders of intercultural indigenous movements, campesinos, small producers, businessmen, farmers, and all those that have been affected by the fires for a meeting next week. We want to debate how we're going to prepare for the future after the fires.
Official statistics show that apart from heavy winds and temperatures close to 39 degrees, the fires are mostly being fueled by farmers, livestock owners, and people with apparent political interest to discredit the government's work. Nonetheless, 20 airplanes and 6,000 people are working to stop the fires.
Coming up, the death toll in the Bahamas has climbed to 50. More on this developing story after this. Welcome back. The number of people who have been killed by Hurricane Dorian in the Bahamas has climbed to 50. A statement released by the Commissioner of Royal Bahamas Police Force says 42 bodies have been found in Abaco, while 8 were recovered in Grand Bahama. Many remain missing as relief efforts are still underway in the affected islands. Spokesperson for the National Emergency Management Agency, Carl Smith, reiterated that the death toll is the official number confirmed by police.
The official death toll comes from the police. The information to date is that there are 50 persons officially declared dead. We expect that there will be more. But, we have to be responsible, respectful, and follow proper procedures.
Now, while Bahamians struggle to resume life after the destruction caused by Hurricane Dorian to some communities in the island, progress is being made. One such stride is the resumption of classes.
That all children displaced by Hurricane Dorian who are now in New Providence will be placed in new schools by the Ministry of Education. We are committed to minimizing the disruption to their academic studies and giving them back a sense of normalcy. On Thursday of this week, there will be a registration exercise at the National Stadium. This includes all students, teachers, janitors, school administrators, and other employees who have been evacuated to New Providence. Students and employees will be reassigned to new schools in New Providence. Assistance will be provided for uniforms, school supplies, and transportation.
But anger and frustration is mounting among displaced Haitians living in the Bahamas who had their lives upended by Hurricane Dorian. Their large immigrant community in Marsh Harbor was wiped away by the hurricane. Some Haitian immigrants are now living on the streets, while others have sought temporary shelter in a church now being used as a shelter. In 2009, the number of Haitians living in the Bahamas was an estimated 39,000 out of a population of about 350,000. 120,000, according to the Bahamian Department of Statistics.
From this morning, I only drank a cup of tea from this morning. Look up the time right now. All right, they put me there. I don't know nothing. Nobody don't say nothing about us. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to say and what to do. So I need help.
We could try and find jobs, but a lot of us, we lost our passport, we lost documents and everything. So it'll be hard to find jobs with no documents.
Meanwhile, more than 100 Bahamas evacuees were kicked off a boat headed to the U.S. and were told that was because they didn't have U.S. visas. It happened last Sunday, just when the Bay Ferry was about to depart from Freeport in the Bahamas bound for Florida. An unidentified person on the boat then announced via a loudspeaker that anyone traveling to the U.S. without a visa must get off. As a result, dozens of Hurricane Dorian survivors, including children, began disembarking. Scores had lined up for several hours waiting to get on the ferry in the first place, one of the few ways to leave the ravaged island. Evacuees say they were told before boarding it was okay to do so with just a Bahamian passport and clean police record.
They were saying that they just got a call from CBP, and CBP told them that everyone that doesn't have a U.S. visa and who's traveling on police record has to come on. At the last minute like this, it's kind of disappointing. It's hurtful because I'm watching my daughters cry.
Shifting gears now, a major fire ripped through villas on the historic John Palmetto Plantation Estate in St. Kitts and Nevis. Videos show the entire structure engulfed in flames on Monday evening. It's not clear how many tourists were staying at the villas at the time of the fire. Also known as the Clay Villa Plantation House, the estate is a 10-acre property just west of the capital city of Bastille and is known for its beauty and history. There are no reports yet of any casualties, and the cause of the blaze is unknown at this time. Foreign nationals in South Africa's Cattlehound Township have sought refuge in community halls after being displaced by a recent wave of xenophobic violence. According to officials, about 850 people were forced to leave their homes that were robbed and burned to the ground. At least 12 people were killed by the surge of anti-foreigner violence in Johannesburg, the country's financial capital, last week. Foreign nationals have repeatedly called for support from the South African government and regional bodies.
But in the news they are saying the fighting was finished, but we are still fighting. They are fighting with us even today. So what I'm asking, now I'm homeless. They bent everything what belongs to me. It's only that I thank God because I'm still alive.
Once I get out of this gate, sometimes I'll get a shot. Some of the guys, their properties were not burnt there by the location, but when they tried to go with the police to take their possessions back, they were shot. We're under a very serious threat, but I don't know what's going on with the government, because the government is just taking a little step.
In other news, relatives and government officials have attended a mass for Zimbabwe's former president, Robert Mugabe, in Singapore, where he died. Mugabe died on Friday at age 95 at a hospital where he was being treated for several months. The delegation is expected to fly with his body on a chartered flight to Zimbabwe on Wednesday. Mugabe was Zimbabwe's first leader after the country's independence from Britain in 1980. He ruled for 37 years until he was ousted in 2017. The former president's official funeral will be held on Saturday.
We had a very touching ceremony. It was a mass held by a Catholic priest from Zimbabwe, father who has been attending to the family for the last few years. So it was a very befitting mass.
Sudan's new Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok will head to South Sudan to join peace talks between the ruling Sovereign Council and South Sudan's rebel leaders. This will be Hamdok's first foreign visit, and he will join 5 members of the Sudanese Council in the South Sudanese capital Juba on Thursday. South Sudan's exiled rebel leader Riek Machar is already in Juba holding separate talks concerning a stalled peace agreement. Sudan's transitional government has made peacemaking with rebels one of its main priorities, as it is essential for the U.S. to remove the country from the list of sponsors of terrorism.
For us, it is considered a strategic project, and it's a goal to be achieved and accomplished because peace is the basis for achieving stability and development. That is both economic and human development that will not be achievable without sustainable peace and the participation of all citizens.
We'll take a short break now. When we come back, we go to Britain, where the opposition leader has given trade unions a pep talk ahead of anticipated elections. Don't touch that remote. Welcome back. Palestinian leaders have denounced as a war crime plans by Benjamin Netanyahu to annex a large swathe of the West Bank if he wins next week's elections in Israel. The Israeli Prime Minister says he will immediately apply Israeli sovereignty over the Jordan Valley and the northern Dead Sea if voters back him at the polls next Tuesday. Around 65,000 Palestinians live in those areas, which Israel occupied in the 1967 war. Netanyahu said he would wait for an agreement with President Trump before annexing other areas of the West Bank.
But there's one place where Israeli sovereignty can be applied immediately after the elections. If I receive from you, citizens of Israel, a clear mandate to do so, in recent months I've led a political effort in this direction, and in recent days the political conditions for this have ripened. Today I announce my intention to apply, with the formation of the next government, Israeli sovereignty over the Jordan Valley and northern Dead Sea.
What Prime Minister Netanyahu said tonight about asking his people for a mandate to allow that will enable him to annex the Jordan Valley is paramount to a war crime. Annexation of occupied territories is a war crime. So Mr. Netanyahu and those who help or aid Mr. Netanyahu in such a vision of annexing Jerusalem, annexing Hebron, annexing the Jordan Valley, the Jordan River, the Dead Sea, and then keeping Palestinians in their small towns and villages as prisoners without any freedom, that is a war crime. And as we are about to enter the 74th session of the General Assembly of the United Nations, the international community must stand tall now, all, to say a big no and to stop treating Israel as a country above the laws of man.
Hours after the Prime Minister's suspension of the British Parliament came into effect, the leader of the opposition Labour Party, Jeremy Corbyn, has addressed the annual Congress of the Trade Union Movement, the TUC. He told them an election was coming and that Labour would defeat Boris Johnson's neoliberal no-deal Brexit.
Under the cover of no deal, they will sell off our public services, strip away the regulations that keep us safe, and undermine workers' rights. And they will cement all of this in a race-to-the-bottom trade deal with Donald Trump. Be in no doubt, a no-deal Brexit is really a Trump deal Brexit. Congress, the general election is coming. There will be a real change of direction. In the next few weeks, the establishment will come after us with all they've got, because they know we are not afraid to take them on. We're going after the tax avoiders. We're going after the bad employers. We're going after the dodgy landlords. We're going after the big polluters destroying our climate and natural world, because we know whose side we're on. We are creating a society of hope and inclusion, not of poverty and division. Congress, thank you for receiving me here today.
Now, the suspension of Parliament in the early hours of the morning provoked unprecedented protests from opposition MPs.
No.
MPs booed and shouted no when the ceremonial figure of Black Rod summoned the Speaker John Bercow to the House of Lords for the formal proroguing of Parliament. Several of them tried to prevent him from leaving the lower house. And with that, we've come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Doris Polo. Thank you for watching.